In that same conversation about psychopaths, John Lash explains how psychopaths relate to the Archon infection of our galaxy and our world.
And say, oh, absolutely. There's no doubt that the archontic parasites take advantage of the interspecies predators. And that, I guess, in a phrase, would sum it up for me. That's the key relationship. They are two independent sorts of entities. Gnostics described the archontic mind parasites as being literally and exactly an extraterrestrial species. They have a long story about this species. It's not just a fantasy that these people have. They have an extremely coherent and cosmological scenario explaining the existence of this species in our solar system. You know,
and it explains the solar system itself.
Right. It's connected with the whole evolution of the solar system. They actually came to exist before the Earth existed, and that's why they're called archons, because it's derived from the Greek root archon, meaning before the beginning or first. So actually, as the Gnostics taught their cosmology in the frame of the Sophonic vision story, these archontic beings existed in the solar system and constructed the solar system previous to the existence of the Earth itself and previous to the emergence of humanity. So, wow, I mean, there is a remarkable and unique cosmological perspective if you want one. But regardless of whether or not you're going to go look at that cosmology, the Gnostics were explicit that the extraterrestrial parasites use us, those among us who are predators to our own kind. So there is a deal between those people. And what I'm perceiving lately in the course of my lifetime is that there are some human beings, we call them the psychopaths now, who are so deviated from the rest of humanity, who are so lacking in empathy, and who are so possessed with the need to control and the phobia of life that they actually become zombie vehicles for these ET parasites. This is a fact. And so there are totally archontified human beings walking around on this planet. How would we profile them in terms of the subject of our discussion here? Well, they are psychopaths who are at the extreme degree of dehumanization and of mechanically mindless, violent behavior.
It's very interesting looking at this psychopath problem from the standpoint of the archons and how they're used. You know, they're not the end all be all. Psychopaths are simply seem to be following directions or living out a distortion. David Icke calls the archontic infection kind of a distortion in the wave and harmony of life. And this distortion is causing, or might be, causing the creation of psychopaths or using the psychopathic tendency individuals or bloodline psychopaths to destroy not only the fellow human beings, but also the entire Earth. I mean, look at what's happening now. We've got these chemtrails that are spraying aluminum, barium, strontium, and God knows what kind of other particles coming down. Viruses, bacteria, other engineered things are hitting people and destroying people and the Earth. Look at fracking. You know, I'll tell you one thing that the Earth needs more than oil and natural gas. That's water. And fracking destroys the water. They're pushing GMOs on us. I mean, major psychopath, Bill Gates, now in charge of Monsanto and pushing those GMO human-destroying organisms on us. It's all around us. We see the effects of the psychopaths, and it's hard to escape the realization that there is a force that seems to be counterproductive to life on the planet. So you say, well, how can a few sick people really threaten society? And I think it's safe to say that the legendary 1% or less than 1% that control the world are probably all psychopaths. I don't think that's a stretch. Because if they weren't psychopaths, their money and power would be taken away by psychopaths. Because remember, they don't play by the rules. So, I've been speculating after going through all this information on psychopaths, as how does the 1%, granted they're powerful because they lack empathy, they can do anything they want, charming, and quite frankly, ruthless. How can they control the whole planet? How can they push this agenda? How can they really threaten the existence of the human race and threaten life on the planet? I mean, even if the 1% owns, I don't know, 60 or 70 or 80 or 90% of the world's wealth, I don't know what they do. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, yeah, it all plays out because they want to control everybody. They have everybody either on the payroll or experiencing some type of really deep mind control. Mind control that might even be bringing up psychopathic tendencies in everybody. Let me give you the hierarchy. From where we're looking, from the psychopath level, of course there's levels behind the psychopaths that might be manipulating the psychopaths. Mm-hmm. But under the natural born psychopaths, I think there's a whole category of people. People who might be CIA agents. They might be children of CIA agents. They might be, some way related to mind control or government organizations, where they take them and they put them through mind control, like MKUltra and Monarch programming, that probably brings out whatever psychopathic tendencies they have in them. I know that I've watched interviews with super soldiers, and they explain that they go through trauma-based mind control. This is where a child is subjected to horrible depravity, extreme cold, extreme heat, watching their fellow participants, children, being eaten by snakes, things that would terrorize you. And then what happens when they're in that terrorized state is their personality seems to fracture. And they create another personality. And these other personalities are designed to deal with whatever they're dealing with. And I can remember a person named Aaron McCullum who was interviewed on Project Camelot. And he was talking about his mind control and how he had. Oh, this was an amazing interview. I don't know if you remember.
I do remember it. It was mind blowing.
Right. Here's this kid. He's telling us about his mind control upbringing, and right before our eyes, you can see his personality switch. Mm-hmm. His mouth is controlled differently. His eyes look differently.
He looked like a different person.
He looked like a different person. So, and he said that he really can't experience fear anymore because he must have an altered personality that comes in and takes over when those situations arrive. Now, this kid, apparently there are big missing gaping holes in his life where he's been, or one or two of his personalities have been employed to go out on assassinations for government. So I think there's the production of psychopaths or mind control slaves or quasi-psychopath, I call them manufactured psychopaths, that would also be, I would say enslaved to the major psychopath class that seems to be controlling mm-hmm. these organizations.
Mm-hmm. You were talking about the hierarchy.
Right.
Okay.
And the people that are mind controlled, they all know that they have handlers. So I would imagine these handlers, I would imagine by
Do
the,
they know that they have handlers while they're in the midst of being controlled by them, or not until after they break out and they can observe that they have these different personalities?
no, I think they know while they're in. According to Kathy O'Brien,
Hmm.
she knew who her handlers were the whole time. Now, these handlers would have to be psychopaths.
Yeah.
How can an individual put another individual through this unless they were a psychopath?
Right.
And also, I heard the other day an interesting interview on Red Ice Radio, and they were talking about the Kennedy assassination. And they talked about these professional killers that work for the CIA and Mafia, and how they get them to be killers. And they were talking about a process that would involve the child, 3 or 4 or 5 years old, being forced to watch a puppy die or a rabbit that they were close to die, being killed. And then, of course, they would move on to having to kill it themselves. And they'd move on to killing larger things until finally they would graduate into killing people with no remorse. I mean, this is just what they did.
Mm-hmm.
They were like brainwashed. So I think there's another layer of, call them manufactured psychopaths that are underneath the bloodline psychopaths. Now, this is very simplistic, but it might give a blueprint as how the few can really control the many. And then, of course, you have the controlled minions. On the higher level, you probably have Congress people, high level, they're involved in high level extortion, where every one of these people has a file. And in this file is evidence of wrongdoing. I mean, it might be, kissing your secretary on the cheek, or someone loading child pornography into your laptop.
Uh-huh.
And so they can control in that way. I think that's the major way that they control the Congress and Senate. I think people that are maybe elected to office aren't always psychopaths, but certainly they can be controlled by the psychopaths through this file method.
Right.
And then there's the control minions class too. These are the bureaucrats and policemen and people that are professional mercenaries. They're controlled by money. With the dwindling industrialization and languishing job market.
Mm-hmm.
You might need to do so. You might have to
People
be
are desperate. They'll do almost anything.
right. You might have to be a TSA agent.
Right. And not because you're a bad person, but you have a family to feed.
Right. But what happens is when you start doing things like that, you do things that, because of obedience, you do things that kind of violates your morality a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But
then you justify it.
And then you justify it. Your mind feeds it back, and then you justify, they've done a little bit more. Well, you did this and that, so you certainly could do that. And they slowly seduce you into giving up your whole moral identity and your conscience for money. It's important. You have to do it. And of course, we've been so schooled, really schooled and conditioned to be obedient, that it's really hard for us to be in a position where we need money. We can be obedient, but obedient means becoming less human. We can't be doing things that a normal human being. Remember, I've been a couple podcasts ago, we mentioned that this statement by a person named William Casey, who was the head of the CIA in 1981. He said, "We'll know our disformation program is complete when everything the American public believes is false." So here's the psychopath making a frontal assault on your beliefs. Well, that statement by William Casey, I always think about gaslighting, because I think that's a statement of a personal intention to gaslight the entire American public.